First of all, I'm going to repeat a few things that have been said in the hour and 2 hours before. So which means that the lineup is good. So I'm not coming with something completely new, but I'm trying to find a kind of a different angle towards several conflicts that I would like to discuss. Actually, I would like to start with this vote on 7 April 2020, which is more than a month after the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. And it was a vote in the Human Rights Council of the UN to suspend the membership of Russia. 193 people voted in favor, which you can see behind the pictures. 24 against and 58 abstention. Actually, you can also see here that some countries have not voted, which means, next slide please, that 20 countries were strategically absent. So if you count everything together, from the 195 countries in the UN, only 93 voted in favor of this, rather important resolution in the Human Rights Council. If you break it down, from 54 African countries, only 8 voted in favor. 45 Asian countries, only 5. From the 18 MENA countries, only 2, Libya and Israel. So the support came massively from Europe, the Americas, Caribbean, and Oceania. But you can see that in, let's say, Africa and Asia, there seems to be a massive problem with support for this, not just revolution, but for the West, perhaps in general. Next slide, please. So I've been walking around a bit in the last few months. And actually, it was in Doha that I heard the former foreign minister of Pakistan say, like, okay, the West are now our support for sanctions against Russia because they are not, they don't follow international law. But in 2003, when it was the Iraq War, we had to support you, even if you also did not follow international law. So why do we have to support Russia, the United States in 2003, and now sanction Russia? So what about these double standards, which was something in the massive Doha conference that was cheered by a great deal of the public that was present? A second comment I received from the ambassador of Uganda to the European Union, he said, well, why should we need to choose camp again? I mean, is this a Cold War again? We don't want a Cold War again. We want not again choose between the West and Russia. New slide. Next slide, sorry. So I think what actually happened on 24th of February is that the world and the world order has changed dramatically. Mm-hmm. And while, as I say, Europe and US perhaps see that as a big conflict, a lot of countries in Asia and Africa see that another European country. It's a long time ago, it's another European country, but this is again a European country. And what I also hear all the time is that in this changing world order, this losing support in the UN is I made a quick list. Is that what I hear is that the Iraq war was also illegal, Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo. I mean, you didn't follow human rights or international law. Capitalism as like the system of the West actually since the financial crisis also collapsed in many countries. The migration crisis, many complained that it was not well done by Europe, even stopping everyone, pushing them to Turkey, pushing them back to Libya. And it's felt like quite unfair. And in the end, the pandemic has made quite a lot of people, certainly in Africa, quite angry. They say, I mean, first of all, you don't give us the vaccines. Then we have to go the vaccine from Russia or China. And then we can't go to Europe because we have the wrong vaccines. So next slide, please. Well, I would go back to what we have discussed here many times and what, I mean, in the years before, and also Irina mentioned it. I mean, what I think is happening right now is actually kind of reopening the can of collective historic trauma. And, well, Van Volken has been quoted. I mean, the psychology of large groups and how historic trauma actually can lead to large group regression, into a former stage. I mean, I still remember the story of John saying that one guy was being angry, someone was murdered in this river. And then like, when did it happen? Yeah, in 1543. Like, but he was still angry about it. So So these old things, I mean, are still alive. Also, Eugene, who is in Australia, I believe, who is talking about collective historical trauma of Aboriginals, even though that the trauma itself is actually going generations back, they're still living through today. And if I may, I mean, also, I use the concept of collective trauma in my presentation here about tribalization and actually on the global effect of what this might get. Next slide, please. The word I want to focus on here is actually the word resentment. What I see and feel around the world, I mean, that's perhaps a bit exaggerated because I'm not traveling around the world, but that's how you read things, of course, you see things, you watch videos, you see people, is that there is the level of resentment is actually going up quickly, very, very seriously. And as we just discussed actually also with how to solve the Ukrainian war, and what we see is that most peace agreements in general to end wars actually have the seeds of the next war. One example is, of course, the Treaty of Versailles, where Germany had to do serious payments. They felt humiliated. And this is how actually Nazism could, on this basis, Nazism has been built in Germany, and Italy has been, in fact, in Italy, these were the engines actually of a new war back then. Next slide, please. I said the seeds, I mean, might be old. So, and what we of course see is that these seeds of resentment are all directed towards the West, who has been dominant in the world since the 18th century. So, and we also see that because of our dominance, I mean, West and Europe, the US and Europe, we didn't really care about this. We didn't really listen to the people. And now the new world order is emerging. I mean, I think that understanding what this resentment is about, what these groups are thinking, is going to be the essence of avoiding conflict in the world. Next slide, please. A bit theoretical, I mean, I will follow resentment and rebirth of myth as a kind of a theoretical framework, in which, again, collective historical trauma based on humiliation, new elements that come up that actually open this can of historical trauma into a new collective regression. This collective regression seeking strong leadership and the story of great mythological past from before the time or just after the time of this human humiliation. And of course, this resentment monster, as I would call it, is being fed by every new small or big element that actually fits in the idea of humiliation. So the authoritarian leadership is using this myth in order to fight the perpetrator of humiliation. And actually, this is, as we have seen in Ukraine, the recipe of war. Next slide, please. So this has been told in the last session, actually, so let me go quite quickly over it. Russia's resentments, of course, since the fall of the Soviet Union, I mean, it lost Moscow, as such, lost 1/5 of its territory. The shock therapy, mainly done by the IMF, United States, and the World Bank, was a big failure that actually left most people very poor and some very rich. Also, of course, a lot of status. I mean, from a world power, Russia just became actually a developing country in political chaos. Next, please. I mean, this story, of course, you know, also as well, the enlargement of NATO despite some promises. And actually, and this is something also very important, that the year Putin became prime minister in 2000, April 2000, if I'm right. So until today, Russia has seen the one after the other, what they call color revolutions. They believe that these revolutions are being instigated and supported by the West in order to undermine Putin's, well, friendly state. And this is something he already said for the first time in 2007, where this resentment actually will, for the first time, be spoken out by Putin in the Munich conference. So the revolutions, you see them, I mean, it's quite massive. Serbia in 2000, Georgia 2003, Ukraine 2004, Uzbekistan, and so forth. Almost the entire post-Soviet world has seen revolts. We, of course, deny that the West is supporting them, but they don't believe it. Next slide, please. So Russian myth is also one thing that has been told already more or less. I would go a bit further than Illich, the writer of the 1950s. It's actually going back to Kiev in the 9th century, and Vladimir the Great, the fourth, say, almost king of the kingdom of Kiev helped the Byzantine emperor. He got the sister of the Byzantine emperor as his wife. And so they suddenly started to see, and they converted to Christianity, so Cyrillic script. So this was the beginning of Christian Russia as a possible successor of the Byzantine Empire. After the fall of the Byzantine Empire in 1453, actually the next big Tsar, Ivan the Great, married the niece of the emperor. They took the symbols of the Byzantine Empire and they saw themselves as the third Rome, after the first emperor Byzantine, the second. Their ambition was to gather all Slavic people from in one empire, and of course also defend Christianity against the decadent powers, being the enlightened West. I mean, I'm talking, of course, about centuries later. And this is exactly the thing that has been revived after the fall of the Soviet Union in 91. First slowly, and then we have seen it growing, and every act that was actually against them, I mean, it became a common view. Next slide, please. So the question is, I mean, we all know more or less what I have said, but the question, was this war avoidable? I mean, because, I mean, the day before the invasion, not just me, I mean, everyone thought it's not going to happen because it's just irrational. It's something you can win, it's going to be Russia, Iraq, and so forth. So there's something this, I mean, we all say that it was irrational, and it's maybe no accident, and we'll come back to this at the end of my slides, that this war actually started 2 years after 2 years of pandemic, 2 years of nobody talking to anyone except online. All the summits were normally have summits of 2 days, were summits of 2 hours online. And Putin himself hasn't been talking to anyone for real outside his Kremlin. How could we have been avoiding the war? I don't know. But the question is, have we done enough efforts to understand Russia's resentment, and have we done enough to actually cooperate Russia in the security umbrella after 91? There's a lot of discussion about it, certainly in the United States, saying that of course Putin is not serious about it and so forth, and what Baker said was before the collapse of the Soviet Union. But still, I think we should ask some questions perhaps again. And second and lastly, can we learn lessons out of this invasion for all the powers that show resentment? Next slide. Middle East resentment. I mean, we often forget, I mean, how far away in history people go back to feel humiliated. And I lived for 5 years in Cairo. I mean, this story I heard time and again. It started with the colonization of Egypt in 82. Then the first war, the Egyptians were promised independence. Of course, it was not given to them. Then the Arabs were asked by the Britons to destroy the Ottoman Empire, Lawrence of Arabia, you know. So, and they would get their own country. They didn't get their own country. Instead, it was an agreement, Sykes-Picot agreement, that divided the Middle East in two. North was for France, the South for Britain. And then there was a Balfour Declaration of British Foreign Minister who said Palestine is actually a place for the Jews. In 1924, the rest, let's say, of the broken up Ottoman Empire became Turkey, and Mustafa Kemal abolishes the Sultanate in 23 and the Caliphate in 24, which feels like as if the Italians would just tomorrow abolish the Pope. So it was quite a shock in the Arab world. Next slide, please. Of course, it didn't stop there. I mean, there was Israel Foundation, all the lost wars, even 73, although some say it was otherwise. The occupation of Palestine, of course, the turning more conservative of the region, and the war in Iraq were things that went still today. I mean, are still today going pretty deep. So this myth that has been used in the Arab world, the only myth before perhaps the humiliation was bringing back the caliphate. That's why the Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 21. That's why actually Al-Qaeda was founded in order to fight a global war against this Christian-Jewish conspiracy against Islam. And that's also the reason why the Islamic State was founded in 2004. What's next? I don't know. The question is, how to solve the humiliation question? Next, please. Turkey. I know there are quite a lot of Turks. I'm going on a slippery slope here. But of course, Turkey has been founded on what was left of a large Ottoman Empire that was founded in 1299, so it collapsed by the British and the Arabs in the First World War. Ataturk wanted to make a European country out of it, so he abolished the Sultanate, the Caliphate, the Arab scripture, and started a process of quick and fast secularization. In 1950, Turkey became one of the first members of the European Council of Europe. 63, associated member of the European Community, and 86, it wants to be officially candidate of the European Union. However, the reaction was almost largely in Europe that it's impossible because Turkey is a Muslim country and Europe is a Christian club. So Turkey is not welcome. However, next slide, please. In 2004, Turkey is finally accepted as a candidate country for the EU. And that's the very recent history of resentment in Turkey. Earlier in 2004, there was the referendum in Cyprus on Kofi Annan's plan for the unity of Cyprus. The Turks pushed the Turkish Cypriots to vote in favor, the Greeks voted against. Who became member of the European Union 1 month later? The Greeks, who actually voted against. And then the negotiations with Turkey started. They were these same Greek Cypriots who used their veto to stop and to do difficulties in the negotiations. So the Turks are a bit annoyed by it, to say the least. But then in 2005, during Angela Merkel says, I'm against Turkey's membership, while the negotiations are ongoing. 2007, Cyprus, he says the same. Merkel says, no way, never going to happen. And another small thing perhaps is that in 2016, there was a coup. I mean, I'm not talking about the reactions against the coup, but it took the West a long time to condemn what was actually happening against the democratically elected president. Before I'm going into this, I'm not saying that this reading is the right reading of history, or it is one reading of history, but this is a reading of history that we often forget. And it's one reading that counts a lot in the minds and hearts, for example, in this example for the Turks. So this myth, of course, is going to be the Ottoman myth. 2009, Davutoglu becomes foreign minister. He had this policy of good friendship with neighborhoods, but also neo-Ottoman ideas. The Arab Spring starts, the Muslim Brothers are winning elections. So Erdogan thinks, okay, my friends are going to rule the Middle East, and I'm going to be the example of democracy and Islam that is going well together. He visits Egypt and Tunisia. He's been hailed there on the street by Erdogan, Salah Eddin. And in 2015, Morsi gets a coup. Erdogan takes actually the leadership of political Islam on himself and tries to still defend the idea until after the intervention in Syria and whatever happened in the rest of the region, they had to bury again this idea. But this myth of Ottoman leadership was suddenly born again in Turkey. And he's built, you've all seen the pictures perhaps of the new palace of Erdogan, in which he put all the guards like an Ottoman pillars. Next, please. China's resentment. Actually, China has a concept of the Century of Humiliation, which started in 1839 with the first Opium War and ended only in 1949 when Mao, let's say, established the People's Republic of China. It's a history that is not well known in the West, I would say, but I mean, you can read what it says. I mean, basically, the West has tried to open up ports and trade routes of China, getting opium in order to become filthy rich, actually. So, and every time China was trying to stop the addiction of its people, then the West, if I may say, of Britain at least, stopped this effort and tried to get people more addicted. Britain invades Tibet, France takes Vietnam, and all of this led to revolt, to one revolt after the other, until finally in 1911, it led to the end of the Chinese Empire, which lasted 2,133 years. Next slide, please. We have always looked at China a bit like, okay, these guys, I mean, they're doing their best to citizen and so forth, but they cannot make technology. They only copy us, right? So, and they are also doing some stuff in Africa and in Latin America, but it doesn't really matter. And until China launched its Belt and Road Initiative, and suddenly you got a discourse saying China is overtaking the world. So we have to stop them. It's becoming an enemy. And when China got its real technology suddenly right and got better than us and got 5G, and we said, we don't trust you, we don't want to use it. So I understand some reason anger, saying like, I mean, we have done what we can to and support, and whatever we do, we're becoming a bigger enemy. So, but in the end, nobody knows what China wants, and nobody asks actually what China wants. I spoke to a high official of the European External Action Service, and she said, yeah, it's true. We don't talk to China. We have no idea what they want. But we are now imposing sanctions very soon on this and this and this. So, next slide. So China's myth, I mean, well, it's going back to Mao, and the idea of never again is becoming stronger. Next one, please. Coming to the end, so to make it a bit controversial, I thought I put the US on top of it also in the slides. So I see, or I think I see, there's also enough Americans here that there's some kind of also resentment, at least in some groups in the United States, that is rocketing, that is polarizing the society, and maybe it has to do something with lost industry, lost privilege, lost wars, to be discussed. But I think that what we have seen on 6 January 2021 has been underestimated, undervaluated, I think, until today, that this was an attempt to overthrow the democracy in the United States. Even though it was amateur, it was a real attempt, I think. Next one. This is the second last slide. So, when I look to possible future wars, I think we have to look at regions where there is still resentment present, or countries where resentment are pushing others into chaos. I think the Balkans, I mean, question is China. The Middle East, again, perhaps question mark. I'm much more worried actually the Sahel. Well, Russia is very active on the ground with military and with on social media to create chaos from Somalia up to Mauritania and Libya. So, and if a few of these countries already collapse, and it's a dangerous thing that, of course, will also push migration back to Europe and destabilize Europe as well. However, and of course, this is open to discussion, probably the biggest danger for world order might be some kind of civil war in the United States. I don't invent this myself. I hear in Brussels quite some people talking about it, perhaps not in Washington, but there are op-eds about it. And of course, if that would be the case in one way or another, we're not talking about 1860, then of course, the United States will be self-centered more than any time, which will be again, leave the liberty or leave the space for all the other people or the other countries that we are seeing there, or perhaps do what they like. So last slide, let's have a positive one. How to avoid war? I think nothing is inevitable here. I mean, we see things that are going in the wrong direction, but one thing is that we see is, of course, we see that the extremes are getting stronger in the West, in Europe, in the United States, and they are making the center almost very weak, impossible to govern. My country, for example. In one way or another, I mean, we will have to strengthen the center. I mean, I think of the poem of Yeats, in the center cannot hold. I mean, this is exactly what I think we're talking about. Also, something that we need to stop doing is what I call West-splaining. So I was with a colleague in Lebanon, and the French guy was explaining Islam to the Muslims in a Muslim country. And that's what we do, actually, so Europeans. So I think we really have to start listening and asking what countries and regions actually, what would they think? We don't know a lot about history of other countries and regions, and we just, then explain it again to them. And I think we need to study much more what their history was. And finally, I think, and here I'm coming back to, let's say, the question with Russia. If there would have been a real dialogue with Putin years ago, not just like Sarkozy tried a week before the war, between the West and the rest, and having, let's say, opening up to what others have to say and try really to listen what they want or perhaps not want, I think is a first necessary step to reduce resentment and hopefully perhaps to avoid war. I think this program is not over ambitious, it's doable, but I think we just have to start to do it. Thank you.